Thanks for joining in as we continue along in our series of the coming of Christ. Today we're going to pick up in the second part to our topic on the recompense of God. Last week we looked at Revelation 15 and we had our introduction to God's recompense. We saw that interlude passage that kind of recapped some things that we were seeing in Revelation 14 about, Revelation 13 about the Great Tribulation, and how God's people were given over to the beast and how they were killed for their faithfulness and maintaining in their testimony and holding fast to the truth of God. And so we pick up this week and we're going to continue on to see what transpires in what we call the finality of the wrath of God. We saw at the end of Revelation 14 this idea of God's wrath in the notion of these two reapers, right? The first reaper reaped from the earth, and we would assume that those people were those who are God's people, God's harvest. And the second reaper reaped, and we saw that cluster, those who was reaped, went to this great wine press of the wrath of God, right? So we get these depictions of God's wrath. All right, so what I'm going to do is hop over and I may do a little brief recap and connect some things that points to a lot of the things that we will cover in Revelation 16. If you did not check out the teaching from last week on Revelation 14, I just invite you to go to the Limbs of Christ channel. Make sure you watch the video, subscribe, like, dislike, leave comments. I love interaction. I love feedback. So do not be shy. You also can join a meetup group, Lambs of Christ, if you want to join in on our weekly Bible discussion, so you can RSVP. All right, so let's hop over to the presentation view. All right, so this week we will be in Revelation 16. This will be our focus chapter. But before I go here, I want to pick up on some common threads that connects Revelation 14, 15, and 16. And so we talked about from verse 1 through 13, what we got here was a recap and an introduction of what was to come. Here it talks about, I want to say we pick up, so it says, verse 9, then another angel, a third one followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worship the beast and his image and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he also will drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is mixed in full strength in the cup of his anger. And he will be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever. So this is ideal of God's eternal torment that comes to those who worship the beast. And then we see the story of the two reapers that I talked about. And here in verse 19, we see it describes this second reaping as reaping those from the earth that goes to this great wine press of the wrath of God. It says in verse 19, so the angel swung his sickle to the earth and gathered the clusters from the vine of the earth and drew them into the great wine press of the wrath of God. And the wine press was trodden outside the city, and the blood came out from the wine press up to the horse's bridle for a distance of 200 miles. And so we understand that what comes on the heels of this great tribulation is God's recompense to those who have done harm against his saints. In Revelation 15, we get this idea of these seven bowls, which described as seven bowls of the wrath of God. But this also described the seven plagues. So again, we have this symbolic understanding because the language of this symbol is changing. The symbol is changing into different things. But we get the idea of what's happening. This is the instrument in which God is using to pour out his wrath. And so that's why we see in verse 7, then one of the four living creatures gave to the seven angels 7 golden bowls full of wrath of God, who lives forever and ever. And the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power, and no one was able to enter the temple until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were finished. And so we see it described as 7 golden bowls, and then here it is described as the 7 plagues of the 7 angels, right? So they're one and the same. They're the instruments in which God is using to pour out his wrath. And we read, then I heard a loud voice from the temple saying to the 7 angels, go and pour out on the earth the 7 bowls of the wrath of God. So we now understand Revelation 15 was giving us a heavenly depiction of what was going on in the heavens before this event right here happened. So there's chronological ordering to gather from that, right? And so now the 7 angels who was introduced at the end of Revelation 15 is going to pour out these 7 bowls of wrath, and the object, the receiver of this wrath, is the earth. It's described as the earth. Verse 2 says, so the first angel went and poured out his bowl on the earth, and it became a loathsome, malignant sore on a people who had the mark of the beast and who worship his image. And so now we see distinct harm again coming to those who are on earth who did not have the mark of the beast. Now, think about this. We know that from the sounding of the first trumpet is when God started to pour out his wrath. However, we saw the first 4 trumpets, there was indirect harm brought to the people via, we're going to describe as famines and plagues, right? Then in the sounding of the last 3 trumpets, we get introduced to this idea of the 3 woes. Now, the 3 woes are distinguished from the sounding of the first 4 trumpets is because they bring direct harm to the people on the earth that do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. And we see here that now we're getting back into that same pattern, because it took a break in between the sounding of when the second woe occurred, and we go into this time of the gospel being presented to the nations, being given to the nations, and this time of great tribulation, which is harm being done to the people of God by those who worship the beast and by the beast. So the people of God are being killed for their faithfulness in this time of great tribulation. But there's no direct harm that's being brought to those who don't have the seal of God, which seems to be out of place, because you're like, well, I thought this was supposed to be the 3rd woe. Like the first 2 woes, well, the first woe, we see demons tormenting those who don't have the seal for 5 months. Then in the second woe, we see a third of those of the earth who does not have the seal being killed. So direct harm coming to them. So now we get back into this same pedigree of direct harm when we see these loathsome, malignant sores on the people who had the mark of the beast. So now it introduces it doesn't describe them as those who don't have the seal of God. It describes them as those who receive the mark on the beast. So here It's how we know this is whatever's happening here is chronologically after the Great Tribulation, right? And then in verse 3, we see the second angel poured out his bowl into the sea, and it became blood like that of a dead man, and every living thing in the sea died. And so here we have harm being brought not directly to those who worship the beast, but indirectly to those who worship the beast. It's taking away their food source, right? It's taking away a source of food from the earth. Then it says in the sounding of the third angel, I'm sorry, not the sounding, but then the third angel poured out his bowl into the rivers and the springs of waters, and they became blood. And I heard the angel of the water saying, righteous are you who are and who were, O Holy One, because you judged these things. For they poured out the blood of the saints and prophets, and you have given them blood to drink. And so here's how I understand the connection, right? That God is harming them through what I call the food source in the pouring out of the second one. Here is their source of fresh water. It's what they drink. And God is repaying them by giving them blood to drink because they poured out the blood of the saints. Right? And then it says, they deserve it. And I heard the altar saying, yes, O Lord God, the Almighty, true and righteous are your judgments. Basically, we get a praise of God's righteousness in doing this because of their acts, because of what they have done to the saints and the prophets. And the fourth angel poured out his bowl upon the sun, and it was given to it to scorch men with fire. So again, we see something that's bringing direct harm to those who are on the earth. And it says, men were scorched with fierce heat, and they blasphemed the name of God who has the power over these plagues. And they did not repent so as to give him glory. And so let me pause right here before we go on to the fifth seal. So all of these things are punishment coming to those who are on the earth, right? And we saw in Revelation 14 in the story of the reaping is those who were reaped from the earth in the second reaping, who goes to this wine press that's trotted out outside the city. In that symbolic language, I would say, outside the city. We'll probably get into that in Revelation 17. But we see that there are people who are experiencing the wrath, being depicted as experiencing the wrath of God, just in a different depiction. Here in these first four bowls of wrath, the people on the earth is receiving God's recompense through the plagues. And I for one believe this is a real event. This is something that will happen after the Great Tribulation. Just as real as the Great Tribulation will happen, futuristic event for me in my understanding of Revelation. And this right here is going to literally happen. Like, will it be as described right here? I believe so. I believe we're going to see them as these are going to be plagues that happens to all the earth. And so I think that's very important to understand, because some people will say this is symbolic for just the final judgment, right? This is just a different way of depicting the final judgment. And hey, they could be right. They could be right. I just, when I read these events, they seem to be real events that are going to happen that must be fulfilled, right? Now, if they're fulfilled in just the final judgment that God gives when He comes, then I was wrong, and I stand corrected. But I'm going to show you why I believe these events happen in a particular order before the coming. This is judgment that's happening to the earth before Christ returns. Verse 10, then a fifth angel poured out his bowl on the throne of the beast, and his kingdom became darkened. So this is very important. This first clause, it introduces this idea of the beast having a throne, as if the beast is a king. And if the beast is a king, he has a kingdom. And it says his kingdom was darkened. And they gnawed their tongue because of pain. And they blasphemed the God of heaven because of their pain and their sores. And they did not repent of their deeds. Now that's interesting language there. They did not repent of the deeds. It's because now we see harm not coming to the people, but it's coming to the forces, the demonic forces that were behind their actions. You can think of the people as like the people of a kingdom. They do the deeds of their king. They act in accordance with their kingdom. And we're going to see their worldview. They act in accordance to their great city, their worldview, their system that goes against God, which is why they do harm against God's people, right? And so here we see God bringing recompense to the beast and his kingdom, his throne. And then we see the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river, the Euphrates, and its waters was dried up, so that the way would be prepared for the kings from the east. So now in the sixth angel pouring out his bowl, we see not necessarily harm coming about right now, but we see there's this preparation that's being had because something is about to happen. In verse 13 it says, and I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, 3 unclean like spirits. And so we see this unholy trinity again. Just want to highlight this point, right? The dragon, the beast, and a false prophet. Remember in Revelation 13, I said it was almost a depiction. We got this depiction of this unholy trinity. We got the first beast, who was operating in the power of the dragon that was introduced in Revelation 12 in that depiction. And then we got another beast, but I said that beast, when we read what it was doing, it was acting more like a prophet. It was trying to get people to worship the first beast, right? So there's the idea of, in this whole unholy trinity, there's this idea of the false prophets, there's this idea of this king, right? And there's the idea of the one truly behind giving those authority, the dragon of old, the serpent of old. All right, and then it says, for they are the spirits of demons performing signs, which go out to the kings of the whole world to gather them together for the war of the great day of God. And so we say, well, what is this great day? And we see now what's happening, what's being prepared. And God has prepared a way, and he's sending out these unclean spirits, these demons, to go and deceive the kings of the whole world, the authorities of the whole world, to come up against God for this great, what's described as the war of the great day of God, right? And then on the heels of that, it says, behold, I'm coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake and keep his clothes so that he will not walk about naked and men will not see his shame. And so this gives us this idea of God the Almighty is coming on this great day. God the Almighty is coming on this great day in which this war will happen, and all these kings will be the leaders, the authorities of this world will come up against him. Right? And this is very important because now I'm saying, well, okay, so this is really talking about the coming of Christ and what's going to happen on his coming. There's this great war. And if you want to know more about this great day of God, this great war, we're going to look at this a little more when we get into the later chapters. But go back and look at like Ezekiel 38 and 39, right? And you'll have an understanding of this promise God has given about this great day, this war that is coming. And so I believe this is giving us an allusion back to, it's alluding us back to the promise that was given in Ezekiel. All right. And it says, and they gathered them together to the place which in Hebrew is called Armageddon or Armageddon. And then the seventh angel poured out his bowl upon the air, and a loud voice came out of the temple from the throne, saying, "It is done." And there were flashes of lightning and sounds and peals of thunder, and there was a great earthquake, such as there had not been since man came to be upon the earth. So great an earthquake was it, and so mighty. The great city was split into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. Babylon the Great was remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of his fierce wrath. And every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. So let me stop right here. It introduced this idea of the great city was split into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. Babylon the Great was remembered before God. Now, if you want to say physically, what is this city? I would say the earth, right? Because that is what harm is being brought. The earthquake is what's bringing harm, and what's it's obviously gonna cause something to split, right? However, I believe you're missing the point if you try to look at this literally, because the city is really representing a worldview, a system that is contrary to God, that the people of the earth, the people of the kingdom of darkness, those who received the mark of the beast, who was punished early, has embraced, right? And what God is saying, he has brought judgment to that worldview. He has brought judgment to that system, because he's brought judgment to the people, and he's brought judgment even to the physical earth that has been corrupted because of the people, which is the throne, currently the throne, the kingdom, where the kingdom of the dragon is. Because remember, Revelation 12, the dragon was thrown down to the earth. In the great tribulation, the earth was given to the dragon. The people of God was handed over to him to be killed. So it's like this coming out of time where the earth was given over to the dragon, to the beast, what the beast was operating under the power of the dragon, to have its way. It was truly his kingdom. But now God is bringing judgment and recompense for those who brought harm to the saint. And here it's pointing out what is referring to the symbolic language of a city. that's now receiving wrath and judgment. But we know wrath and judgment is coming to the earth. We know the earth is being impacted. The sea is being turned into blood. Fresh water is being turned into blood. People are receiving malignant sores and being scorched with fierce heat, right? And in this final plague, it says, and every island fled away and the mountains was not found. It's like this change in the geography. And we see this as being caused by a great earthquake. This change in the geography and fled away and the mountains were not found, and a huge hailstorm, about 100 pounds each, came down from heaven upon men, and men blasphemed God because of the plague of the hail, because its plague was extremely severe. And so that pretty much covers everything I wanted to talk about in Revelation 16. Next week, we'll get into Revelation 17 and probably 18. But what we need to walk away with this, what we need to walk away with from this chapter is understanding why would God give us this message? Why is it important for God to share this dreadful judgment that happens to the earth and those who have brought harm to the saints? Well, it's to disarm us from feeling the need that we need to bring or give wrath to those who are on the earth that's bringing us harm. It's to keep us from not being distracted of our main task. That is giving the gospel, that is saving souls. Because when you see how dreadful this time will be for someone who does not believe, you find yourself taking upon your purpose in which God has made you an ambassador of reconciliation, all that more important. It's nothing more important. If that's true, if you believe, truly believe what God is telling you is what is due for those who don't believe, who brings harm to the saints, who embraces this worldview that desires to usurp God, a worldview that began in a fall in the garden. And God says man has become like one of us, so they cannot eat from the tree of life and receive life. And ever since then, we see this great conflict, this great war of those who are the seed of the woman, and those who are the seed of the serpent, those who are God's chosen, those who are not. And now, on the heels of the depiction, when the saints are killed for their faithfulness, they're handed over to the beast to be killed for their testimony and faithfulness to Christ and receive their great reward in heaven. Now we see God is the one who repays those who brought harm to the saints. And so I encourage you to go and watch some of the previous videos. If this is your first videos, you'll probably understand a lot of things much better with much more clarity, because a lot of things we covered a lot up until this point in Revelation 6, in the book of Revelation. And if you have not, go and subscribe to the channel, like, dislike, give me comments, feedbacks. I'm open to it all. But more importantly, just make sure you hit the subscribe button if you like the content, if you want more. And you can find also my group on meetup.com, Limbs of Christ. If you want to join our Bible studies on Wednesdays, be sure to join the group, RSVP. Would love to have you. Would love to get your understanding of what's going on in the book of Revelation. And you can be in tune to all the other events that we have going on. If you're in Colorado, I have local events, I have in-person events, and I'm looking to start another online event, which we will have our first event this weekend, Unpacking Forgiveness. So until the next time, be blessed, study the scriptures so that you may divide the word rightly.